This is a groovy party, man.
Yeah,
I
brother,
can
like
dig it.
stop right on.
Hey, man, what's your name?
Good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. That's 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. Hey, good morning to you, Calvin. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Earl. It was a good long weekend. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, man. I thought about you, man. An extra day.
Yeah, the extra day goes a long way.
Yeah, man. It's it's one day closer to another weekend, right?
That's right.
All right. Hey, it's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams. Good morning to you, Sandy. How you doing, man?
Good morning, Earl. It was a good weekend. I didn't burn the chicken.
Well,
and I think Calvin's going to become a proponent for the 4-day work week.
oh yeah. Hey, Calvin,
Maybe we all should,
You know, it is something that interests me, but we got radio to do. It'd be a little weird leaving it with just 4 days.
Yeah. You know, Sandy. I had a long weekend. I had 30 pounds of chicken,
which is a lot to eat, Earl. Yeah, you should have stopped at about 1.
So Calvin, I was on a grill for 7 straight hours on Saturday, man. Standing up 7 straight hours. And Sandy,
did you singe all the hair on your arm? Sometimes when I'm over the grill, what's that? My hair's burning.
You know, that great apron that you gave me.
Yeah.
Man, it makes all the difference in the world. Prior to you giving me that apron, I would stand in front of the grill with nothing.
Well, actually, Earl would be dressed. Where he's not saying he was,
yeah.
Because he was drawing quite a crowd.
Well,
yeah, what did I give you? That lacy apron? No.
Well, but what it does is deflects the heat.
Yes.
And when you're standing in front of a grill for that many hours, you realize just how important that item is. Right. Not that I plan on doing that again until maybe next year.
I was kidding. This is annual, though. I remember last year at this time we talked about the same thing.
Do it every year. So
well, and then there's Thanksgiving where you cook all those turkeys.
Yeah. Well, it's year 12 of Heal the Hood, and that's an event, a huge block party in the city of Milwaukee. It's supported by the mayor and other people, and so a lot of dignitaries and other people are there. And so it's good to serve. We had our guys, the Voices of the Elders, our organization there volunteering their time and effort. And it's always great to see families and events that take place in the city that's maligned for always being really violent. And so throughout that 10 hours that went on, not as much as an argument. So that's always a great thing. I'm always excited about
I think the problem with news is that it only talks about bad things that happen, right? I mean, or tremendously good things like somebody winning the pennant or something. But I mean, the day-to-day things that happen that are joyful don't get covered by the news. It's just the argument that the bad argument.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of families. And anyway, it was a great time. Yesterday I was back at the grill, but not for 30 pounds of chicken. Did some grilling at home. And but I've kind of had my fill of grilling for a while. Those days of grilling for large groups of people. You still do that.
Well, the largest group is my assembled family, which is
that's pretty,
gets to be sizable, but it isn't 30 pounds of chicken, I'll tell you.
No, I don't care if I ever see another piece of chicken for a long time to come. But anyway, an awful lot to talk about this morning. As always, you can always join us at 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. Sandy, before we get into all of that, by the end of this week, it's June.
Yeah.
Man, where is
this year going?
Hey, man, it's
The
June.
Republican convention is a month and a half off.
Sandy.
It's just whipping along.
Once we hit a certain point in our lives, time just flies.
And it's not necessarily because we're having fun.
No, man, it's amazing to me that it's June.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, let's talk a little bit, man, about the passing of Bill Walton.
Yeah, I was thinking. Well, you mentioned it as well, but the NBA finals are almost upon us, and I think the much bigger news and the news that sobered everyone up was Bill Walton, and then we can talk about something else, and another tragic death in the golf world. But Bill Walton was such a heroic, such a fun character. Actually, I think everybody who watched NBA basketball loved to watch him play. He was such a joyful player, and then his broadcasting was fantastic.
Well, even before the NBA,
yeah,
I remember him in college at UCLA, and I remember him being a very athletic, 6'11" 7 foot tall guy who faced the basket. UCLA had 4 years of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a guy.
Well, and at that point it was Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, Lou Alcindor, a guy who had his back to the basket.
Right.
Completely different players, and it just changed. Bill Walton is one of those guys who today you find a lot of centers facing the basket. Bill Walton was one of the first to do that.
Yeah, like Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
I think he played a lot the same way, actually. I suspect that in today's world, Walton would still be a star.
Yeah, and Bill Walton was, as a young guy, he was enigmatic. He was a guy who, early on you could kind of see that he probably, took a toke or two in his early years at UCLA.
Well, I just heard some snippets of his broadcasting too. He was an intellectual. He talked about, the snippet I heard was him comparing one of the players to Beethoven's Third Symphony. I thought, wow.
He was also he was a character, man. He played a lot of jokes. He did a lot of different things, but more than anything else, if you really knew who Bill Walton was, you saw a guy who was a humanitarian, and you'd have to really know of him to know that that's who he really was, in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And every day he said he got up, he wanted to make a difference in the lives of somebody else, and that's who Bill Walton was. And gone too soon, 71 years old. That's why you got to just take advantage of every day that we have. And you said a golfer. I didn't hear about the golfer. Who was it?
Well, yeah, tragically, a golfer named Grayson Murray, 31 years old.
Oh, 31.
He was in the midst of a tournament this weekend. He'd won a couple of tournaments his rookie year. He talked during his career then about battling depression and addiction. He walked off the tournament after the second day, and apparently the next day tragically committed suicide.
Wow.
And in fact, I think we have a guest on Friday that's going to talk about depression and suicide awareness. But suicide is something that people are so reluctant to talk about, and it's such a prevalent problem, particularly in our country. And so I think this Grayson Murray episode definitely brought everyone in the PGA sort of up short and sobered up about what is important in life, in the same manner that losing someone like Bill Walton.
Sandy, suicide is expanding. Suicide is generally done by young people.
Yeah.
Who haven't really had a chance to live their lives. It's rare that you find out about, a seasoned person taking their lives, but it's young people who really haven't had a chance to live. And sometimes life circumstances seems almost unbearable to so many people. And we take for granted.
Yeah.
I think those of us who are able to navigate life life's not always easy for people.
Yeah, we'll talk about it Friday. We don't have to depress ourselves now.
Yeah.
But a statistic that's very sad is the fact that more veterans have lost their life by suicide since the beginning of the Vietnamese War than all of the veterans who died in war. So it's a terrible problem, and it's one that we need to be awake to and not suppress thinking about, because it's there, and lots of families have been touched by it.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to thank Calvin for, on yesterday, playing that show where we had our good friends, Sandy, Roger and Mark Foreman, playing that back on Memorial Day. I think was genius, Calvin. And as I listened to it, it was perfect. So thank you for doing that, man. It was really perfect.
Yeah, I thought it was a powerful hour, and I thought it was thematically appropriate.
Yeah, it was. It really was. So anyway, we got a lot to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about James Carville. If you don't know who that is he still married to that woman who was on the other side of?
I don't remember, but I do remember at the time.
Madeline something. I don't know.
Yeah, and she was a Reaganite, and he was a Clintonite.
Yeah.
And the two of them married.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Well, and he's a character. He's a remarkable character. But he's the one who originated the "It's the economy, stupid," and when he was head of the Clinton campaign, and he remains a gadfly and a very active pal in terms of being a consultant.
Can you imagine today a MAGA person and a far leftist being married together and making it work?
You mean like George Conway?
Yeah. And
that's right. That didn't work.
Yeah. And Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, we really want to talk about how it's possible that, how do we bring back together those who are separated in this nation right now? Because it almost appears to be impossible. And Sandy, I think you talked a little bit about the fact that the Civil War, we still haven't come to grips with that yet. So we'll talk about that, many more things. You can join us at 844-967-2789. It's a Tuesday edition of the Earl Ingram Show with Sandy Williams.
Virgil Kane is the name, and I served on the Denver train till Stoneman's cavalry came, tore up the tracks again. In the winter of '65, we was hungry, just barely alive. On May 10th, Richmond fell. It was a time I remember, oh, so well.
All right, welcome back to a Tuesday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with Sandy Williams. And Sandy, the music that you picked out for today.
Well, this is, we didn't do a show yet on Memorial Day. This is kind of Memorial Day music. It's about the various wars. That's Jerry Garcia's band, actually performing at the Bradley Center in 1991. But that's the Civil War.
All right, let's go to the phone lines and Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. You say what?
Hey, guys. Hey, James Carville and Bill Maher, they're both talking the same talk, and that is they tell the truth. I think the Democrats, wait, just let me finish, Mr. The Democrats have a problem criticizing Joe Biden. And me, as a Republican, I have no problems telling you about how much disdain I have with Donald Trump. I mean, there's a lot of problems that he has. You guys just need to realize, I mean, we have two people to pick from. I keep telling you guys that all the time.
Oh, we don't know that?
You just have to, yeah. You have to be honest with each other, and
Well, let me just say, I think both Earl and I have been critical of Joe Biden. I think we talked about his age. I think we've talked about the fact that if there could be another candidate, that would probably be not a bad thing. But you're right. We only have two candidates. So now we're down to that. So now we're trying to pick and choose between them. But I think with respect to the people you're talking to, there's been a fair amount of critical thinking about who the candidate from the Democratic Party ought to be, as well as the Republican.
And Gary, I also think that when you call and say you're telling the truth, as if you've got something, to back you up, and that we're somehow not being truthful because you believe that Donald Trump you have a right to your opinion and your belief, but that doesn't make it fact, man.
I always tell you it's not fact. I always tell you that when you guys talk about, oh yeah, Donald Trump said this and that. Well, you know what? I say, well, I wasn't in the room, but do I believe that he actually said that or whatever? I'm not a witness to this stuff, so I always give you my opinion. Now, as far as getting together, I'm on my way. I'm in Fox Point right now, and my customer is waiting for me. But I'll tell you something once. I talk politics with this gal, and I've known this gal for 40 years. Little did I know that she was going to come down on me when I talked about Trump. And she said, "You're going to vote for Trump." She threw me out of the house. We've known each other for 40 years. I've taken care of her furnace and her air conditioner. I replaced them twice already. And all of a sudden, I came home that night, and I told my wife, I said, I'll never hear from this gal again, ever. And I said, I'm really sad that she hates my guts because I'm going to vote for Trump. All of a sudden, about a month later, she called up and said, "Oh, Gary, this is something I need this, I need that." And I said, "I thought I'd never hear from you again." "Oh, no, I don't let politics ruin our relationship." That's the way it should be.
Hey, Gary, first off, you're getting away with using the term gal to talk to women. It kind of predates you. Women today don't like to be called gals. That's number one. Number two, Gary, thanks for the story, man. I don't have the stomach.
Well, I think the story is symptomatic of a problem we've got, and I think it's the problem we're going to be talking about. So, no, I think you're right that we have a great deal of trouble once we find out which side we're on. We tend to put a fence between us and draw personal conclusions, and I think that's the very problem. So I'm glad you recited that story, because that's exactly what we need to get behind us.
Well, since we're there now, and we were going to get into that a little bit later on, Gary opened up Pandora's box. 844-967 2789 is the number. And you know, listening to Gary, and again, Gary represents, a lot of people. I keep hearing one of the things that frustrates me, Sandy, is when I hear people say, 70 million Americans, this is how we feel, excuse me, and you're dismissing the 70 million of us because that's how we feel. Well, there's people on the other side, and I don't ever hear them say, 80 million of us feel this way, and the other 70 million, it's that kind of, Sandy, I think conversation, when we begin having conversations, we can't have it like that.
Well, and both sides are guilty. We end up with people calling on from the left who are describing the right, and we have people from the right describing the left, all of them having a sort of a blanket description, categorically defining the opposition. It's we, they. We've become, our whole political discourse has become we, they. It's not idea versus idea, but it's we, they.
Well, Sandy,
and that's the problem.
But so part of that is when you hear people say, we are not going to accept the outcome. When you hear people say, it doesn't matter, we were robbed. And here it is 4 years later, and you're still saying we are robbed.
There are actually people when they're interviewed out in the field who will insist that Donald Trump is the president right now, that he was lawfully elected and therefore is the president, even though Joe Biden's in the White House. I mean, yeah, we have some very confused thoughts, but you're right. The symptom that is the thought that the election is rigged, that the election was stolen. That's the symptom of a very deep problem, one that could destroy the democracy, actually.
So, and that's being discussed right now, not from what happened 4 years ago. They're talking about if Trump loses,
right?
We're not, and I'm not just talking about all these people are saying if he loses, we're not accepting that.
Well, they're saying they're not willing yet to say they're going to accept it.
Unless he wins.
Well, which is exactly the language Donald Trump has always used about the election. Well, we'll see. We'll see if I'll do it. But I mean, the fact is that it's kind of like playing a card game. You have to accept the fact that the other guy won with his cards. You can't pull a gun, stand up, tip the table over, and shoot him. And that's kind of what's going on when we talk like that.
844-967-2789 is the number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesday with my co-host Sandy Williams and you.
Tipperary. Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day. All the streets were crowded, sure everyone was gay, singing songs of Piccadilly, Strand, and Leicester Square, till Paddy got excited, then he shouted to them there. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. It's 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesdays with Sandy Williams and Sandy the Music Choice.
Well, this is sort of Memorial Day music. That's A Long Way to Tipperary by Gene Autry, who was a singing cowboy of the 40s and 50s. Tipperary was at the very southwestern tip of Ireland. When the troops left the United States to go over and fight in World War I, they would land at Tipperary. This song was a big hit during the period of World War I.
So, Sandy, Gary from Sussex kind of, began to talk about one of the things that topics that we're going to talk about today. We're going to do it later on in the show, but, he opened up the conversation. So, we'll take the conversation now, 844-967-2789. This divide with the American people is akin to North versus South and what took place in the Civil War. And Sandy, you stated that in many instances that wound has not been healed.
Well,
to this day.
Yeah, I think what's worrisome to me is that the Civil War was a regional, at least nominally, was a regional war. It was North versus South. We had the Mason-Dixon line, and if you lived north of the Mason-Dixon line, you were in the Union. If you lived south of it, mostly you were in the Confederacy. And that was the battle line, and that was the division in the country that had to be resolved, we thought, with the end of the Civil War. And we had Reconstruction, and we had a fair amount of rebuilding of the relationship between those states. But the fact is that there still remains an echo of the Civil War. If you take the Mason-Dixon line and paint the colors of the states north and south of the Mason-Dixon line, south of the Mason-Dixon line is red, north of the Mason-Dixon line is mainly blue, or at least purple. And so, we still have a sort of a political echo that relates to the social issues. Even after the Civil War, we had the Dixiecrats. We had the Southern Democrats who formed an alliance with the Northern Unions, and we had the Dixiecrat Democrat Party that was still premised in many respects on the social disunity between North and South. And today, what worries me is that the breakdown we have isn't regional so much. It's might be rural versus urban, but it's in every state, and it's neighbors against neighbors. Gary mentioned the fact that he was talking to one of his customers and had a breakdown that at least he thought he had a breakdown that was premised entirely on the political, on the heat associated with the political discussion.
So, Sandy, this divide is not young people. This is an old war. These are old wounds, and these are, if you will, old soldiers. You're in my generation who carry this with us and continue to fight this crazed battle that at some point in time probably will end when we go. Really, I think.
Well, hopefully, in a way, hopefully, I'm not hopefully that we all go, although it's inevitable.
Right.
But hopefully it will cut down on the extent of the antipathy between us and the we-they nature of the discussion. And it's interesting, if you try and cut apart the current political debate, there still remains a great deal of echo of the political issues, not just slavery, but the political issues that divided us in the Civil War. States' rights, immigration, in a way, reflects much like the racial divide in terms of the discussion. So we continue to have in our society a lot of strife, and hopefully as the young people become older, they will bring with them a different view of a lot of these issues.
You know, Sandy, this divide is in homes.
Well, it's certainly in homes at Christmas and Easter when the grand family, the in-laws and the cousins and everyone get together. At that point, I think lots of us bump into political disagreements that can be very strident.
So is it repairable? And is the question, and how do you begin to repair it if you've got a person who continues to pour gas on the fire? Because at the root of it, Sandy, is an arsonist who sees a fire and continues to pour gasoline on that fire.
Yeah, the politics of division needs to stop for us to get over this, because right now politics is being driven by this notion of divide and conquer, get us arguing at the level that you argue about things that are extremely emotional, emotional arguments, not intellectual arguments. And we need to get over that. And we won't get over it so long as leadership is taking us in the wrong direction. I talk about equilibrium, social equilibrium would be a situation in which there's relative peace, harmony. People have arguments, but without discord. That would be equilibrium. And are we moving towards equilibrium right now or away from equilibrium? And I fear that we might still be on a path moving away from equilibrium. January 6th was certainly a symptom of extreme disequilibrium. But the fact that we have a significant number of people continuing to talk about how they won't accept the outcome of an election, when you understand that if you don't accept the outcome of an election that's been adjudicated by the courts as having gone one way, then what is the option you've got that you're talking about when you're saying you're not going to accept it other than the use of force?
I was watching Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, I think he's from.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, and they asked him a direct question. Senator, will you accept the outcome of the election? And he's a respected guy on both sides. Democrats kind of respect Tim Scott and Republicans respect him. And they asked him point blank, and he said, well, when Donald Trump's hand is raised as the winner, then we'll accept what? I mean, it's that kind of thing, Sandy, that in statements that are being made by people who should know better, that keeps us at odds with one another, right? Why is it so difficult for him to say, yeah, well, if the elections, we're going to accept the outcome of it, regardless of what happens. That's the right thing to say, right? Well, but he's hedging his bet because he wants to be the vice president, running mate with Donald Trump. He's afraid he might say something that, will eliminate him. And if he said it, if he would say, yes, I'm going to accept it, that would eliminate him.
Well, apparently it would. And, it's astounding to me. It's one of the symptoms I think we have of a failing two-party system, that we have two-party choices, and people maybe aren't happy with either choice, but the politicians find themselves beholden to kneeling to one or the other of the candidates. And there's certainly one candidate that requires not just kneeling, but ring kissing.
Right.
And more.
And some
yeah. I'd stop him with the ring, but yeah. And the problem is that, so we've got people who are talking in a manner and behaving in a manner that's entirely contrary to our basic democratic pillars, the Constitution, for instance, the peaceful transfer of power between parties, things that are the bedrock for our country. And we should understand that a peaceful, well-operating democracy that has a government that functions properly and regulates our economy in the manner that it needs to be regulated is the golden goose. It's the reason why we have billionaires in the United States and millionaires. It's the reason why we have prosperity. It's the reason why we have people able to chase the American dream, whether it's easier to catch now or not. All of that is at risk, okay, if we don't take care of it.
You know, Sandy, if people really, and I'm sure people are tired of it. They're tired of this ridiculous reality that we're faced with about, 2020. We still don't believe that was fair. And now we're into 2024 and we don't believe that our nation can be fair and balanced.
I think, to be honest with you, I think it's because the American public holds Congress in such low esteem. I think 29% of the Americans think Congress is okay, and 71% think it isn't. Well, if you've decided that Congress, which is the bedrock of our democracy, isn't okay, then apparently you might lean in the direction of wanting to bypass Congress by electing an authoritarian somebody. And who's running for president that seems to be talking like an authoritarian who wants to bypass Congress, wants to bypass the courts, all of these things which seem to have paralyzed our country, right? We have paralysis in Congress. We have courts that seem to operate very slowly and deliver justice very slowly. And so we have a candidate who's attacking all of it. But my question is, what's the end game look like after you've successfully attacked the FBI, the CIA, Congress, judges, all of that? What's the end game look like if you succeed?
You know, Sandy, I'm one of those people who does not believe that Congress is okay. So I've got that in common with some of the folk on the other side. But mine is for different reasons than what theirs are. And I think Congress is not okay when Congress is swayed more by big business and money than it is about the average person that's elected them and put them in office. And I think that as long as we still have Congress that the court jester, and that Congress is controlled by somebody other than the people who put them in office, I have a problem with that. But so I that I think is my reason and rationale. But on the other side, I guess there are people who don't trust Congress because they've got it in for one man. And so I mean, just
well, I think lots of people have lots of reasons not to trust Congress. I think both sides might not trust Congress because of the sway of big money with respect to it. Because
then
both sides see that,
okay,
but big money seems to get in the way of controlling big money's control of Congress. And so that's a problem. We have all these problems that need to be addressed. But they need to be addressed not by getting rid of the institutions, but by fixing the institutions. It's not un-American or unpatriotic to want to fix the institutions of government. It's much more patriotic to want to fix them than it is to want to destroy them.
So, Sandy, I agree with you totally. But that's common ground. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, we both can agree that's common ground, that's fertile ground for us to be able to work together and address that. But then you can't bring in Congress is against my man, and they've got a witch hunt against my man, and you put that above, hey, let's work together to address these issues with Congress on both sides of the aisle that impact and affect us. Right? I mean, to me.
Yeah, I mean, we should be fixing what's wrong and not destroying it. I think that's the fundamental bottom line here, and that's what worries me most.
All right, 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams and you.
Goodbye, Piccadilly. Farewell, Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary.
How does a ragtag volunteer army in need of a shower somehow defeat a global superpower? How do we emerge victorious from the quagmire? Leave the battlefield waving Betsy Ross's flag higher? Yo, turns out we have a secret weapon, an immigrant you know and love who's unafraid to step in. He's constantly confusing, confounding the British henchmen. Everyone give it up for America's favorite fighting Frenchman! I'm taking this horse battle.
All right, welcome back to Tuesday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Texas at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with Sandy Williams. And Calvin, did you know that Sandy was a rap aficionado?
No, that's not rap. That is rap, but it's from the musical Hamilton.
Oh, okay.
And the musical Hamilton tickets used to set people back nearly $1,000 to see a show on Broadway.
Did you see it?
No, I didn't see it, but it was too expensive.
Yeah,
but it was the biggest hit on Broadway.
Yeah, I remember Hamilton. I just, we were talking about this, and we're gonna finish up this last segment talking about it. And maybe Americans are nauseated, Sandy, and they don't want to talk about it anymore. But because you don't want to talk about it doesn't mean it's going away. And as we ramp up to this election, it's best we get this conversation had before the outcome of the election and Pandora's box is opened up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we need to have the conversation so we'll, at least when we come to that point in time, whatever the decision is going to be, we would have at least tempered some of the harsh feelings that we know people are going to have.
Well, I think before the break, you hit the nail on the head that the one issue that seemingly could be a source of agreement across the aisle and across this division is money in politics. And I'm surprised that we can't get people to agree to that and to spend some of their energy solving that issue, because it might end up solving some of the problems of people's view of Congress. And I think it's the view of Congress and the disdain for Congress that has driven us into this rat hole in a way, in terms of the division between us and the lack of respect we have for elected officials generally. So I think that's kind of at the heart of it.
And a lack of respect for one another now.
Well,
if you're on the other side of this.
Well, I do think the other thing we could start doing is reintroducing civility into our culture. I don't know when it stopped.
I think it's too late for that.
Well, it might be. I remember I sensed the beginning of it long ago in about 1980 when I was at a food place and they asked me for my name and they didn't want my last name. They wanted my first name. And that was sort of the beginning of this lack of civility, because it used to be we were all Mr. Williams or, we went by our last names. Soon we went by our first names and had anonymity because no one knew who we were other than an anonymous first name. And after that, everything else dropped.
All right, let's go to Susan from Kenosha. Good morning to you, Susan. How are you doing? You say what?
I'm doing fine. And another great show. I really agree with you. There is a lack of civility in almost every walk of life, and no matter who you talk to. I refuse to talk politics with anybody. I do have, of course, my views, but I don't want to get into an argument. I don't want to have this strife in my life, figuring if I go to a family function that there's going to be people yelling and screaming at each other. I want to have some release from that. But I think that what you did is hit the nail on the head. We have to go and vote people into office who are going to actually take these severe problems we have. It seems that Congress is driven by greed and politics. They don't work together anymore. It's not for the people of this country. It's for individuals to get wealthy. And that is not what our government was set up to be. It is we the people. It is us. So until we get some of these people out of office and we demand that they put caps on all this stuff. It's the same thing if we're going to look at the Supreme Court now. We have two people who really shouldn't be sitting on the bench. How, with their political beliefs and what they have done, how can they be non-judgmental? They can't. So we have to get our people back into office who are not strictly politics driven, but are driven to help the people of this country.
Hey, Susan, thank you very much for the call. Well said. You know, and the last thing that I'll say about this today, anyway, is that there's some people who love to have that us against them, and they thrive on that us against them. You know, I was watching Fox News the other day, something I haven't done in a while, but something for whatever reason, I said, let me see if they've changed anything. They've dug in deeper. Same thing with MSNBC. They've dug in deeper. And the whole focus is on whether or not Donald Trump is going to be found guilty, you know, in this trial, and nonstop coverage on that. To me, that's ridiculous. I mean, I believe he's not going to be found guilty. There's no way 12 jurors are going to all agree. So, you know, I mean, why spend all that time and energy and effort, and then you get frustrated after you find out he's been, you know, not found guilty? Now, where do you go?
Well, that's why, you know, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Mitt Romney's suggestion that there maybe should be pardons. Now, he couldn't have been pardoned on this by the president, but in some regards, having these trials, while it's fundamentally important to prove that no one is above the law, becomes a sparkling object that is sparkling beyond compare. You know, you have to pay, if you're in the news media, you have to pay attention to it because it's an ex-president. He's in court. What else? What could be bigger news, right? But we have so many problems, societal problems, so many issues that we need to address. And it's this kind of bonfire. This is a bonfire, not a brush fire, but it's this kind of brush fire bonfire that distracts us from actually solving stuff and moving the ball forward for Tom, Dick, and Mary.
All right, 844-967-2789 is the number. Got a lot more to talk about on the other side. 844-967-2789 is the number.
was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style but no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy.
All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. That's 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams. And Sandy, once again, for people who are just joining us, the selection of music that you chose
Well,
today.
it's sort of Memorial Day esque. That's music from the various wartime. The Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy was one of the top hits during World War II, about World War II.
All right. Let me do this, Sandy, before we go to the phone lines. James Carville. And, James Carville, when Bill Clinton was president of the United States, he was everywhere. He had this kind of slang speech, a droll. What was it, from Texas somewhere?
Yeah, he was from the South, and it was a distinct Southern accent. I'm not enough of an expert on Southern accents to tell you where. I have the sense it might have been Alabama or Georgia.
Right. And so he was married to a woman, and I forgot her name. You'll bring that up for us, Sandy. Madeline. Something tells me it was Madeline something.
Well, I believe it was.
But anyway, he was a Democrat. She was kind of a Republican, and the fact that they would be going at it sometimes.
Well, let me fill you in on two things. Georgia, state
Georgia.
of birth.
Okay.
And Mary Madeline was the
Mary
name.
Madeline.
She was the political, the right-wing political consultant.
Right-wing political consultant. He was on the other side of the spectrum. And so you would see them sometimes, they were able to pull this off, Sandy, because they were on television quite a bit. The yin and the yang of it in the same family. And I always wondered,
Well, they obviously were able to cross the divide and get along. I think they remain married.
Yes.
And she was a consultant to the first George Bush, George the First.
And she's kind of gotten out of the spotlight. James Carville still from time to time, because he's looked at as a famed Democratic strategist who basically dances to the beat of his own drum. Nobody controls James Carville, Sandy, and what he has to say. Is it safe to say that?
Well, yeah, he throws all convention to the wind, and is a flamethrower, right? He enjoys political incorrectness and being direct. He's the inventor of it's the economy, stupid. And we might have more to talk about in that regard a little later. But he's clearly been viewed as kind of a political savant.
So James Carville had this to say. Now, this is not Sandy Williams. This is not Earl Ingram.
Oh, I fear what you're going to read.
And this is, a couple days ago, James Carville says preachy females are hurting Biden's appeal among Democrats. Now, longtime Democratic strategist James Carville blamed too many preachy females in the party for decreasing President Joe Biden's appeal to men. Carville gave his politically incorrect take to Maureen Dowd in her opinion column published Saturday in the New York Times. After Dowd wrote that Carville has been obsessed with Biden bleeding black male voters, Carville offered his eyebrow-raising assessment. A suspicion of mine, this is Carville speaking, is that there are too many preachy females dominating the culture of the party, he said. Don't drink beer. Don't watch football. Don't eat hamburgers. This is not good for you. The message is too feminine. Everything you're doing is destroying the planet. You've got to eat your peas. If you listen to the Democratic elites, NPR is my go-to place for that. The whole talk is about how women and women of color are going to decide the election, Carville continued. I'm like, well, 48% of the people that vote are males. Do you mind if they have some consideration? Now, 844-967-2789.
Well, you threw the grenade into the room, Earl, and now you think people are going to want to jump on it or talk about it. I think what he had to say, I think he tried to assign gender to something that is different than gender-based. I do think that the Democrats have maybe become overly fixated on a variety of issues that are a bit extraneous and are what has caused them all to be called like liberal elites by those who don't like them. And it relates to things like veganism and not eating meat to save the planet. And, the fact is that liberals embrace a wide range of people. And that wide range includes many who are very concerned about a whole bunch of social issues and issues at large. And so it probably is unique to those who are Democrats to be worried about things like, should we be eating as much meat as we do for our health and for the planet's sake based on methane production and all the rest of these issues, which are rejected by, I guess, a fair number of people who want to bury their heads in the sand. And I might accuse the male gender of being much more likely to prefer their head in the sand.
Well, Sandy, it makes me think, okay, so these things that the Democrats are talking about, and methane and all those things are real.
Yes.
And so they're made to be ninnies. And the fact that people shouldn't be eating a lot of red meat is a proven fact of what that does. And yet they're vilified and made to be some kind of caricatures by the other side.
Just to make sure that I can verify everything that Carville had to say, I was listening to NPR a couple of days ago, and they had a piece on all about the history of the meat industry in the United States and how it is that during the 40s and 50s, the meat industry spent a lot of money advertising to make sure that people understood how virile it was and how very important it was for manliness to eat lots of beef and meat, and that the source of protein, the only healthful source of protein, was meat and its byproducts. And that had a lot to do with the incorporation of and creation of large corporate farms with feedlots and the things that have driven farming into being a much different venture, and that cattle raising has become much different than it was.
So I have to say, Sandy, because Democrats point out things that are beneficial to people on the other side as well. It's not like Democrats are saying, hey, you Democrats, eating a lot of red meat is going to be detrimental to your health. And the Republicans, it's not going to be the same for them. But Republicans then turn around and say, well, those people are they won't leave things alone. I want to keep eating my red meat, as if they don't understand the outcome of what that is.
Well, but I think Carville has a point that from a gender standpoint, and it is true, if we had an election that was only voted on by men, Donald Trump would win by a landslide. Okay. So, there is something to be said about what he's saying, that the message that's being given by the conservatives and by the liberals, the conservative message appeals more to men than it does to women. And then we have to ask ourselves why. Okay. And that's an interesting question. I think his answer is not very appealing to many people because of the way he puts it. But I do think that there is something to be said about a gender appeal that relates to the message that is conservative as compared to liberal.
But Carville is a throwback. I mean, he's from a time when men controlled the conversation.
Well, let's put it this way. If you had an election amongst men who were older than 50, I suspect the Trump victory would be a landslide. So, throwbacks have a big part. You and I are throwbacks.
I know throwbacks. So we're talking about a time when men controlled all those things. And women aren't going back to that.
I know, but it's those very men who feel they're losing control.
Well, that's
okay. So now we're maybe beginning to get to the kernel of what Carville didn't get to in his discussion. But I do think that it's men, it's white men who are losing a dominance which was real in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and which is less real today, or at least feels threatened today.
Sandy, that's it. That's the crux of what we're dealing with. And women, even white women, are saying to white men, that's over. Okay? You better understand that time is over. And so we as women, we realize that we're equal in this society. And we realize that you're not going to control everything that you can. So get over it. Things changed. And from Carville's perspective, whether we like the way, women look at things, they look at things through a different prism than you and I. You and I, hey, meat, eat it. Oh, hey, steak, it's good for you.
Good.
Yeah.
Meat, good.
hey,
vegan, bad.
So John Wayne is a guy who ate steak every day because nobody ever told him that his colon couldn't eventually, that these things would.
Did he die of colon cancer?
Yes.
There you go.
But he ate steak, a big straw. That's an American way. We're going to eat steak every day. Well, those times have changed. There's more information on these things. And so women see it different. I mean, my wife eats.
I do think this, that men are more reluctant to move forward in a lot of these kind of thoughts and stick to their guns.
844-967-2789 is the number. That's a great conversation. That's your thoughts. 844-967-2789.
We met as soulmates on Paris Island. We left as inmates from an asylum. And we were sharp as knives. And we were so gung-ho to lay down our lives. We came in.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, You can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams. And Sandy, you're playing this music based on?
Well, the different wars, Memorial Day, and so I've tried to find music that memorializes the various wars. Obviously, this was Billy Joel, Vietnam. Yeah, in fact, I think when the helicopters come in the beginning, you know which war it's about.
So we're talking about, what's Carville's name? James Carville. James Carville, and a statement that he made that the Democrats are being too preachy, and that if they don't hurry up and change the trajectory of the election based on what they're talking about, it may be too late, and that females have been very instrumental in pushing the Democratic Party where it is, and that it's not appealing to men. A manly man is.
Well, I would say that this whole woke thing, I think what Carville was beating around the bush about was trying to put something tangible to discussion about this whole ephemeral concept of woke that seems to excite people without any definition. And I think it probably excites men far more than it does women in terms of what the impact of it is.
I will say this. Let's go to the phone lines, and Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. Good morning, Sandy. It's really interesting. One of my favorite TV shows of all time was Married with Children. And
mine too, man.
Ed O'Neill and Ed O'Neill in that, he's a very, very strong progressive actually in real life. But the thing is, that show kind of exemplified what men and hypermasculinity, was supposed to be about. Going to the nudie bar and not really getting, it kind of made it where it was kind of cool to be dumb, or kind of cool to be, not in the intelligent, and drink the beer and eat the meat, and all of these different things, almost like me Tarzan, you Jane,
meat,
that whole thing. And meat. And the thing that's interesting about it, and I think that what some people are coming to the realization of, is that like my family has a farm. They raise their own cattle. They actually sacrifice or use the meat to feed themselves, sustenance. But the thing is, there's been so many CAFOs that have happened around the state of Wisconsin, and they're all corporate farming now, that meat is not the same as your grandfather or your grandmother's meat, because it's no longer safe to eat. And it only ends up hurting you by putting penicillin in the meat and putting hormones in the meat that actually end up really messing with people's, systems. The other question I have, and Sandy, I really want you just to think about, you don't have to answer it today, but I have a lot of friends, and I grew up with a lot of friends that were Catholic. Now, I believe the issue is a woman's right to choose versus the government's right to choose when it comes to a woman choosing to terminate or not terminate a pregnancy. But I look at it more like big government versus the individual, and I'm for the individual's rights. But there are so many people out there that are just one issue voters. And there are so many people in the Midwestern part of Wisconsin anyway, and probably the eastern part of Wisconsin, the Green Bay area, that are one issue voters. And it is on this whole thing of a government's right to choose, or what they would call pro-life. I know that the religious right did a very good job coining pro-life, because we know the opposite of pro-life is pro-death. So I guess what I'm asking you, Sandy, is how do we get these people to get off of the being that one issue voter, or are they just lost and we just have to make sure that we get all the women possible that believe in a woman's right to choose out to vote? I didn't mean to sway the conversation. It's just something I've been really thinking about. But as far as the meat thing goes, and the manly man and the hypermasculinity, I mean, really, Donald Trump is nothing more than, Al Bundy, a rich Al Bundy.
Hey, Tom, thank you very much for the call. Sandy, before you respond to that, let's go to Susan once again. Susan, you say what?
Well, I normally don't call in twice, but you did throw the grenade in the room, so that's all on you.
Well, James Carville is the person who said this, that women and the Democratic Party has swayed towards women think, and he says that's a negative thing, and it's really going to impact the outcome of the election. I don't say that I agree with him. I don't agree with him, but that's what he had to say. Go ahead.
Well, I don't agree with him. I think that women only want equality. We don't want to be preaching to people. We show the facts. We want our kids to grow up healthy. We want our husbands and brothers and to live a long life. And it is shown that some things like alcohol, drugs, red meat are a detriment to your health. So if you want to live a long, healthy life, listen to a woman, because we sit and we look at this, we read this, and we try to give you the facts. We don't preach. Whether or not you want to go along with it, it's up to you. We give you that opportunity. But when men say things like this, they really make us women a little mad, because you're looking at us like we're stupid, and we're not. We're highly intelligent. We're just trying to help you lead this comfortable, long life. And that, but if you choose not to listen to us, that's fine. I don't care. I'm going to keep on going, no matter what, and that's how I look at it. But I don't like that terminology, and I don't like going back to the 50s, the 40s and 50s. I will never go back. And I don't want women all over the United States to go back.
Hey, Susan, thank you very much for the call. 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. Hang on the line. We'll continue on the other side.
How do we honor those who have fallen and died for this dream? I'm sure of one thing, it's not with gridlock or bickering. We're the children of explorers that came here from every corner, the adventurers that settled this land. Let the world fought tyranny, touched the stars, brought liberty. Let's do that again.
Good morning and welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. And, you know, we're still talking about James Carville and what he had to say about the Democratic Party leaning more towards women issues. And he believes that they've got to not totally dismiss it, but that 48% of the voters are men. And he's pushing back and saying that Democrats are leaning too far towards these feminine issues. And I don't think these things can be considered feminine issues when you're talking about, you know, climate change and those kind of things.
Except that I think if we did polling, this is just a speculation. Now, I haven't done it and haven't read it, but this is my intuition. If we polled men and we polled women, we'd find out that women were far more worried about climate change than men. If we polled women and we polled men, we'd probably find out the same thing back at the time of the pandemic, that women were much more concerned about the issues of the pandemic than men. And I was just had an epiphany, which is that I think that men are likely to think of things in economic terms. That what is it that's going to damage them economically? And of course, the response to climate change has the potential to have economic downside. The response to the pandemic, freezing the economy, had a lot of downside economically. The meat issue almost relates to economics. So I'm thinking that men maybe are much more inclined to think of the world in near-term economic terms, and women are much more inclined to think about other issues that affect tomorrow. It might have to do with the maternal instinct, offspring, and the like. And so, you know, is it in our DNA for men to think this way, or is it something that's societal? But I don't know. I'm going to do some research before the next show, but I'm confident that if we looked at polls, we'd find out that women are far more worried about future issues than men, and men are far more concerned about tomorrow and not the day after tomorrow.
Well, in the analysis, it's life or money. And women think life is more important than the other. Let's go to Cam from Appleton. Good morning to you, Cam. Your thoughts?
Good morning, gentlemen. I would consider myself probably on the more sensitive end of males, and I even feel like I'm kind of a wiener when it comes to like how much I cry at things. I'm pretty dang sensitive, but I don't impose any of the things that are making me cry on others. I just look at them and I'm like, stop looking at me. I got tears running down my face, you know. So when I hear this polling and the suggestion that women are coming off, from what I'm hearing, he's essentially saying that women are sounding naggy and they're driving men away. I think he's primarily wrong, but he is right in the sense that he's following what I would consider traditional males are calling naggy. And a comparison that I would have that I would challenge women to listen to is, when's the last time your husband or significant other bought their own clothes? If you told them to go to the store to go buy clothes, they would probably just roll their eyes and not do it. But then come Christmas, you end up buying them clothes. And then they're thankful because they have new clothes. But they would probably see that as something that was naggy. Is it really a naggy? no, not really. You're saying, hey, buddy, take care of yourself better. And then they just don't. So I think that the definition of nagginess just has not shifted to these people to be more modern. And that's what they're assuming is driving people away. And I don't know if that's a cultural shift that we need to work on to get people to go, look, you're kind of being a moron by not taking care of yourself. You shouldn't need a significant other or the females around you to tell you to take care of yourself. Brush your dang teeth.
Hey, Cam, thank you very much for the call. Really appreciate it. Sandy, you want to respond?
I'm brushing my teeth.
Okay. Hey, let's go to Gene from McClare. Hey, good morning to you, Gene. I know you got a mouthful.
How do you know that, girl? I just love that Cam. He is just a beautiful guy. A mouthful. I got more than a mouthful. I thought I was listening to right-wing radio this morning. I thought, oh my gosh, what happened to our station? So anyway.
Hey, Gene, I told you, you've got to get the app. You've got to get the Civic Media app, and you won't have to worry about the station disappearing.
No. She said she thought she was listening to right wing. That was James Carville we were quoting. That wasn't Earl or Sandy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He's one of those goofy characters that I'd rather not watch, but sometimes he's got some interesting things to say. This is like right wing talk. I mean, the way that women were treated, and they're trying to push them right back to where they were. That's all I got. I used to live in a city, then I had to move to the outside of a city, and I heard all these things about women. It was just unbelievable. We should have fault divorce because, women won't be able to just divorce their husbands because years ago you couldn't get a divorce when you were a woman. It was unbelievable. Women had a hard time getting a divorce when their husbands were running around philandering and things like that. It's been, women have started till they got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Bulbert and those idiots representing people. They got no respect for women. Now, I don't think that women have to pick out men's clothes. I don't think they should even be pointing out a lot of the stupid things that men used to do and are starting to do and then do in a certain kind of party that are pushing against women. Those men that are pushing against women have had trouble with women their entire life. And let's talk about the big guy. I heard this when I woke up, and I'm sorry that if I missed something. But I'll tell you something. I've been watching that trial, and I've seen the evidence, as they bring out the specific evidence. The documents are numbered. You see that this is the true evidence, and it's not live, but it's coverage of the trial from lawyers. And this guy should not get away with this. This is important. He's gotten away with crimes his entire life. And we all think, well, he's never been held accountable. Well, if he has to, and I'm talking about who. And if he sat a night in a jail cell, he might reconsider his behavior instead of slapping us all in the face. And so it's, to me, it's heartbreaking to hear that maybe we shouldn't have, gone after him for his crimes. Every goddamn crime that guy committed, starting when he ran for office till he's done, he should be taken to court and to task on because he hurt every single one of us in this country. So thank you, guys. I had a mouthful. I apologize, but God darn it.
Hey, Gene, thank you very much for the call, as always. Bill from Oconomowoc.
Good morning, Earl. I really appreciate what you and Sandy do. Women in today's culture have risen above men, I believe, because they're showing how the greatness of women can do.
Hey, so hang on, Bill. Hey, Bill, excuse me. Hang on a second. Do you think that James Carville is onto something or off base?
Well, he's got a point to a degree, and here's what I mean. I'm in the outdoor world. I train hunting dogs. I find the most successful people in the outdoor world are women. They're movers, they're shakers. My daughter, my granddaughter, oh my gosh, what the things they have accomplished is unbelievable. And it would have been not even possible 20 years ago. So when it comes to the election, I think women are the ones you got to really be talking at. You really got to be talking to them. Myself, I'm complacent. I like my wife to pick out my clothes, or if I don't, if she doesn't, and I buy something, I got to have her approve it because I want her opinion. I value her opinion. It's important to know her opinion. So women are a driving force. And by the way, I got to leave you with this thought. I watch Fox because I have to. I always say I watch Fox so nobody else has to. This morning, the question on Fox is, what is Trump in court for? That Fox is showing ignorance. They don't even understand the law. If they got to ask, why is Donald Trump in court? Are you serious, people? Are you educated? Any of you have degrees, or you don't understand our court system? I'll leave you with that.
Hey,
thought.
Bill, thank you
guys.
very much for the call. Let's go to Mary from Tulsa. Hey, good morning to you, Mary. And I think somewhere along the line we've lost the what the conversation is really about, and that's again the fact that one of the top Democratic strategists thinks that the Democrats are making a mistake from focusing on the things that they're focusing on and not the things that he thinks and claims that women who have kind of taken control over the narrative of what the conversation is about for the reelection of President Joe Biden. Mary?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was lost there. A couple of points here. Good points are being made. So women have been the major caretakers of the home throughout history, and it stands to reason that, we're on the front line and caring for the planet in terms of climate change. And then in terms of health, there's a book called The Better Half by Sharon Moalem, not sure the pronunciation, in which he, medical, the husband who is an MD, talks about the health of women having great advantages over men in terms of longevity, resilience, and immunity. So people might want to take a look at that, both men and women, to and really take care of our health best we can. Thanks for the address.
Hey, Mary, thank you very much for the call. No question that I should be listening to my wife when she tells me what I should eat and shouldn't eat. There's no question. She knows that, and they're concerned more about our longevity sometimes than we are ourselves. But anyway, Sandy, U.S. debt now $7 trillion bigger than the entire economy. And I read something the other day where we paid $515 billion towards
interest.
Yeah, interest. And so several things. If we are, and we are that far in debt, but 500 and some odd billion dollars towards interest, Sandy, we need to bring in more revenue to pay this down.
Well, what this means is that our debt has been growing at a faster rate than our GDP, because as a percentage of GDP, it's risen from 40% or 30% to now I think 110 or 115% of GDP. So what does that mean? That means that we can't let debt grow at that rate. We have to make sure that debt going forward grows at a rate, at least on an average basis, grows at a rate that is slower than the rate at which GDP grows. Because if that happens, then this percentage will start to shrink and we can get back down to something more like 50% of the GDP rather than 110%. But it will require fiscal discipline, and it will require us to make careful choices in Congress. And it shouldn't mean that we cut out important programs. It should mean that we rank important programs importantly and cut out programs that are less important in terms of expenditures.
All right, 844-967-2789 is the number.
We need to increase revenue.
All right.
Obviously.
844-967-2789 is the number. All right. Welcome back to the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. Let's go to the phone lines and Ron from Milwaukee. Hey, good morning to you, Ron. You say what?
Good morning. Good morning, Earl. I'm of mixed feelings on this, as I often am on the subject, which is I think Democrats do need to be less policy oriented in their messaging, but I don't think they should have no policy in their messaging. I think they need to refocus what the emotional messages are. Let me give you an example. My analogy is I used to be a journalist, and of course, if you're in print media, magazines and newspapers, there's a story and there's a headline. And most people these days, for better or worse, read the headline. They might read the first paragraph or two of the story. Well, in politics, the headline is the kind of stuff, Build Back Better is a headline, and seal the border is a headline, Republican headline. The story is when, for example, Joe Biden and Democrats get into all the nitty gritty of we did this and we did that, and we allocated this much money for you and that much money for you. We need both, but the selling point is the headline. So I'm sure that they're going to get their policy positions out there in their advertising and so forth. But what's the headline going to be? It's going to be what's this year's a version of Build Back Better. It's got to be something. I would say it should be fair and square. That's the headline. That's the Democratic promise. We're going to be fair and square with the American people on the way money is spent, and everybody gets a fair deal. For the first time in decades, rich folks and corporations are going to pay a fair and square tax amounts so that we can reduce the deficit and still pay for the critical programs that grow the country.
Yeah, it certainly sounds plausible, Sandy.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that headlines are what have traction. That's how we got into the world of sound bites. I mean, sound bites and headlines are essentially the same thing, and the story is what's actually important. And I guess without an effective printed news media, which I guess you used to be a part of, and used to is probably the operative term for most of the people who were in print media, because it's gotten to be something that's more or less in the rearview mirror. Print media is where we got the story and got the understanding, and now we're left with headlines, which is what drives TV news and what drives TV stories. So, yeah, I mean, I think clearly both parties have to figure out what the right headline is, and your headline for the Democrats sounds like a good one. But we need to get the story, and we need to get into the story, and we need to get all genders thinking about the ramifications of the story. And I think what Carville's worried about is sort of the gender difference with respect to the willingness to consider the story.
Sandy, we'll get back to last couple minutes about this deficit. And if you listen to, cut this, cut that, fiscal responsibility, none of us are disagreeing with that. But those things alone aren't going to solve
I mean
$34 trillion in debt.
Cut this or cut that. We cut the revenue side a great deal in the last presidential term under Trump, and that is just as irresponsible a financial act as increasing expenditures above revenue. Okay, when you reduce revenue, you simply created a larger deficit, and so we need to have all these things on the table. But in particular, we need to have revenue on the table and the sources of revenue and the fair contribution of all the participants in the economy to the revenue of the government in order to support a sustainable government. And I was saying early in the show, I think that one of the reasons that I'm worried about our economy is the fact that it's the economy, stupid. James Carville's headline for Clinton doesn't apply anymore necessarily. The economy was strong, and when Trump lost his reelection, the economy is very strong now. But it's easy for the opposing party to attack the economy, even when it seems to be strong with all macro measurements, because the middle class is not participating actively and effectively in the accrual of wealth in the economy that's going on, and it's that middle class that is struggling, and it's easy for politicians to persuade that middle class that regardless of the numbers, the economy isn't really doing that well. And if that middle class thought about their plight, they'd realize that it's programs, it's the loss of government programs, it's the loss of pensions, and it's the loss of child daycare or the lack of child daycare, if it's the cost of healthcare. It's these things that matter. So we have come full circle.
You know, Sandy, I'd also say at the root of a lot of it is the loss of unions and the impact that long term that the loss of unions have had. And yet, when we look at all these different things, Sandy, and these things are really being attributed to Joe Biden because he's the president of the United States, and whether or not it's right or wrong.
Exactly. When the economy has poor architecture, the incumbent is going to suffer regardless of whether it's his fault or not. And what concerns me is that this poor architecture in the economy really requires some new and different government programs with respect to healthcare and healthcare costs, with respect to child daycare, with respect to pension arrangements and the cost of education, the things that are driving the middle class, the two income earning middle class, which is different than the old middle class with one income earner. It's driving them into a corner. And we need to address those things and address the deficit, which means we clearly have to increase revenue, and we also have to evaluate other programs like military spending.
All right. That's it. Thank everybody who made the show go. Thank you, Sandy. We'll see you again on Friday. Thank you, Calvin. Up next, Jane Madner on air, and she's got a special guest in today.
Yeah, Joe Zepecki will be hosting today.
Yeah, Joe Zepecki. All right. We'll see you guys on tomorrow. You've been tuned into the Earl Ingram Show.